Welcome to Behind the Music. This week we discuss Southern California's Rio, a tribute to Duran Duran, the band, the lineup, the shows, the highs, the lows, the groupies, the height, and the eventual rock bottom. For a couple of years, I was Roger Taylor of Duran Duran, while a tribute to him in the Southern California tribute band Rio, a tribute to Duran Duran. It was hot and loud on stage. We were playing the Grand in El Cajon with local 91X DJ Steve West hosting. In one ear, I had the pounding click track to keep the band in time with the backing track keyboards and extra percussion. In the other ear, I had the backing track and probably the feed from the mixer so I could hear the rest of the band. We were playing A View to a Kill, and I was grooving along and lost track coming into the drum part and the key change. I lose track, and it throws the whole band off. The singer Jake swung around and leaned over the drums and yelled at me, "Never again." That was my last gig with the band. I'd started the band a couple of years before. The tribute band scene was growing in San Diego, and I was looking to play with or start something up. I had friends in the Johnny Cash tribute Cashed Out and almost played drums for them. I helped start up the Smiths Morrissey tribute Still Ill, but had to quit during early rehearsals. My wife was pregnant, and it was too much of a time commitment. A Cure tribute called The Cured had been playing around and caught my attention. They were friends and were doing shows with a Depeche Mode tribute called Blasphemous Rumors. They were both part of the burgeoning tribute band agency called Music Zirconia, whose motto was the next best thing, only cheaper. I was looking to fill a gap and saw that there was no Duran Duran tribute band currently playing in Southern California. I reached out to the guys in The Cured and Blasphemous Rumors and started trading emails back and forth, getting advice, tips, etc. I was a huge Duran Duran fan when I was a teenager, and I largely kept an ear on the band throughout their whole career. Roger Taylor, the drummer, was a huge influence on me wanting to play drums, and I studied his playing in the early years of Duran Duran in videos and live performances. So why not start a Duran Duran tribute band and emulate those early Duran Duran years? Frankly, I wasn't a fan of tribute bands at all until I saw Cashed Out. That was what really influenced me to try and get in the scene, and I was tired of playing to small audiences in small bars in band after band. I was hoping for bigger shows. I wanted to emulate that mid-'80s period of Duran Duran, and at times maybe even focus on certain tours or different live versions of songs and more. I reached out to a local musician I knew and character who I'd played with a few times called Raven. Not his real name, but his real name. He was a keyboard and guitar player and played 80s shows to backing tracks, often with a live drummer, which for a few shows was me. He had the 80s look and was a big Duran Duran fan. He was interested. We put an ad on Craigslist to get the rest of the band together and get rehearsing. We knew getting the right singer would be a challenge, but worked to fill the other roles. Right away, we auditioned a bass player named Gil. Not his real name, but his real name. He was the perfect fit. Great bass player, huge Duran Duran fan, and knew the catalog well. Also a great backup singer. The drum, keyboard, and bass slots were filled for now. We would eventually become the New Romantic Spinal Tap with our keyboard player and singer turnovers. From there, we started auditioning singers. We had a couple good local guys come in, one even dressed in a Rio-esque linen suit going the extra mile. One guy from LA had actually been in the touring production of Jersey Boys, and we tried to land him, but he declined. During this time, social media was largely MySpace. I was managing the band and running the social at the time, which was MySpace. MySpace was actually great for promoting bands, but this was back in the time before smartphones. It was still the digital camera era. It wasn't easy to get phones, video, or audio for your MySpace. It took some effort. It's kind of a bummer that we don't have more of these years documented. During our search for a new singer, a real Jersey boy, or at least East Coast boy named Irv, not his real name, but his real name, reached out to us via MySpace. He'd done some singing in, I think, a Journey tribute band on the East Coast and seemed to have the chops. Came in and auditioned, and we liked him. Raven and I were doing a show and asked Gil and Irv to drop in and do a Duran Duran set. The show went pretty well. We wanted a cool Duran Duran reference for the band name, and at this time the band was called Night Romantics. Perhaps a little too obscure a reference to make the reference to Duran Duran, but cool if you were a Duranie and versed in the Duranie verse. At this time, we needed to get some backing tracks down. A lot of bands use backing tracks, and Duran Duran especially use backing tracks. We're going to have backing tracks with keyboards, percussion, and some backup vocals. We had some backing tracks put together for Hungry Like the Wolf, Rio, and Save a Prayer. Now with backing tracks come the click track for the drummer to count the band in and keep the band on time with the backing track. A very important job, often a challenge. We would play a few early sets without the click track, and it caused challenges for us and took a few shows for us to dial it in. We were rehearsing but still didn't have a guitar player. At some point, Irv suggested his actor friend Johnny, not his real name, but his real name, try out for the guitar slot. Johnny showed up to rehearsal one night with East Coast attitude and a very Andy Taylor vibe. We began rehearsals with Johnny on guitar. Early on, we rehearsed in a space where other bands would rehearse at the same time. In one of those early rehearsals, we decided to whip out Journey's Don't Stop Believin'. As the song built, the other bands came into the room to watch us play, and it ascended into a massive, epic, extended jam version. We'd booked our first gig at this point, opening for The Cured at a newly opening club in San Diego. The Cured hadn't played in a while and wanted to get back out there and see what we had as an opener. Our first gig was bumpy to say the least. We didn't use our click track, but used our backing tracks for some of the songs and played others live. Without a click track playing to a backing track, it's easy to get off time, and we did. The Cured liked us and saw potential, though, and kind of took us under their gothic wings. Somewhere early on here, we were having our first creative differences in the band. Raven was difficult to deal with at times. We played another show with him at the Beauty Bar in San Diego. An article was written about that night in the San Diego Reader, mentioning how since we were a Duran Duran tribute band, we drew the ladies. The writer used Raven's real name, and Raven threatened to sue the writer, the reader, and even the band. There was also some confusion over early equipment purchased and who paid for the original backing tracks. At this point, we decided we needed to replace Raven and fired him from the band. We knew we'd be on a break for a bit and decided to rebrand. Irv came up with the name Rio, a tribute to Duran Duran, and we got the domain name DuranDuranTributeBand.com. Created some graphics and kind of relaunched the band. We needed a new keyboard player and rehearsed a few guys and tried some different things, even trying to play live with no backing tracks. At some point, we were referred to a local video game music composer named Rob, not his real name, but his real name, who played keys and had a studio. We talked to Rob, and he convinced us to record more backing tracks to get to a full set, as well as some demo tracks. So more backing tracks mean more click tracks, so we had to get that down so we could play live. In a lot of bands, the drummer starts the backing track, gets a count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and counts the band in with either sticks or cymbals or something like that. The drummer has the count in his ear to keep the band on steady time with the backing track, which can't adjust. So I would need to be able to hear the click track in one ear and then the rest of the band mix in the other. It's tough to hear on stage. We booked a couple of other gigs, one not so great gig at the Blues Cafe in Long Beach, where we got in a big fight in the parking lot, another Beauty Bar gig, which went okay, and a gig at the San Diego House of Blues, which went really well. By the House of Blues gig, we were getting better playing live, but we still didn't have it quite down. I still couldn't hear the backing tracks as well as I needed to. We tried a couple of different things, like an amp with a feed from the click and backing tracks into headphones. It was better, but still not perfect. I did a bunch of research and decided on a solution. I'd buy a small mixer that I would control with feeds in for the click and backing tracks. I'd run the backing tracks off of an iPod and various backups just in case. One channel would be the in for the click and backing track, which I would split between my ears. Another channel would be only the backing track out to the house mix, so it could be mixed live with the band. The key was being able to adjust volume and get the click and track loud enough in my ears, and play drums at the same time. Now, we began rehearsing with this setup, and it got better and better. From there, we had a good run of shows. House of Blues Anaheim, the Belly Up Tavern, Romano's. From there, we got a gig at a casino in Palm Springs called Fantasy Springs. At this point, we were getting some pushback on our singer, Irv. We were debating whether or not to replace Irv, and our keyboard player took it upon himself to bring it public and placed an ad on Craigslist. From there, our former keyboard player surfaced it to Irv, and unfortunately, that's how Irv found out he was out of the band. At this time, we weren't too happy with Rob for going around us to replace Irv, so we fired Rob as well. Gil, Johnny, and I had a meeting and decided that we would be the founding members of the band and work together to make all the decisions. Other members would get input, but we would have double votes as founders. This would come around to haunt me later. So at this point, despite some momentum, we needed a new singer again and a new keyboard player. I think at this point we've been using Jason, not his real name, but his real name, Johnny's brother, as a roadie. He was basically a part of the operation, so we decided he could fake keyboards to the backing tracks. From there, it was mostly Gil and me who rehearsed the singers. We had a guy from Hollywood come in who wasn't quite the right fit. After we'd auditioned him, we reached out and told him he wasn't a fit. He told us about this guy he'd met at an actor's workshop named Jake. Not his real name, but his real name, who showed up in a vintage Duran Duran t-shirt. He connected us with Jake, and Jake came down to San Diego and auditioned with Gil and me. We loved him. He was a huge Duran Duran fan and had a great look and good presence. We asked him to join the band, I think that night. At this point, we started rehearsals with Jake to get him up to speed. He fit in well. He got up to speed quickly, and we got to a point where we had an hour set of the hits. We booked our first show with Jake at the Coach House in San Juan Capistrano, opening for The Cured and I think Blasphemous Rumors, who we'd played a bunch of shows with over my time with the band. At this point, we were really hitting as a band. Jake was a good fit. We even had a couple of female backup singers who would play with us at times, and even a now and again sax player. We played the San Diego House of Blues, the Belly Up a couple of times with Jake, a couple of casino gigs. We played the Del Mar Fair, Lake Arrowhead, and the Knitting Factory in Hollywood. We even played my dream gig, the legendary Casbah in San Diego. Played the San Diego Pride Festival and an 80s for Haiti benefit at 4th and B in San Diego. Over my time with the band, there were some standout shows across all the lineups. When you make that jump to playing bigger venues and sold out shows, it's amazing. Early on, getting to go backstage at venues where I'd seen bands play for years was awesome. Playing the House of Blues Anaheim was an amazing gig. Duran Duran themselves had played there, and oddly that day we were playing, Duran Duran were on the Ellen DeGeneres show. I remember us going out to the stage behind a giant closed curtain, not knowing what we'd see when it opened. We started into, I think, Planet Earth, a common opener for us, and the curtain opened to a packed, sold-out house that was going crazy. We even had people try to jump on the stage. We walked around after the show and got grabbed for tons of pictures. This was our biggest show to date. I loved when we played the Belly Up in Solana Beach north of San Diego too. An amazing venue, and the times we played there were all packed. Great venue, great crowds. Loved playing the House of Blues San Diego too. We played a couple of great sold-out holiday hangover shows with our friends The Cured and Blasphemous Rumors. We'd do great shows with them at the Knitting Factory as well. Playing Romano's in Riverside was a great gig. Gary Romano is kind of a local tribute band 80s legend and a big supporter of the tribute and 80s scene. And it's a great venue, and he always treated the bands well. Playing the Coach House was great. It's a great venue, but it's weird because it's a seated venue. So it's hard to connect with the crowd, hard to really get into it when the crowd has to be seated. Playing at Lake Arrowhead was probably our biggest show to at least 1,000 people, maybe more. We played a couple of awesome sets and sprinkled in the Power Station's Bang a Gong and Some Like It Hot for fun. Playing the Casbah was amazing for me. It's my favorite music venue, and I never thought I'd get to play there. Also loved playing the Del Mar Fair. Always a fun gig. And what? Oh, groupie stories, please. Of course there are groupie stories. Some of us, including me, were married. Some of us weren't and had a lot of fun. We definitely got a lot of attention. Girls like boys in bands. Gil got in trouble for a picture with girls in the Duran Duran tribute Bring Out the Lady story in the San Diego Reader. A porn star looking lady offered to service the singer and me after the Anaheim House of Blues show. I politely declined. I don't know what happened with Irv. Other girls wanted to see backstage. A lady at Fantasy Springs Casino asked me if she could have my shirt after a show, and I told her it was silk and she couldn't. And then she introduced me to two sisters who wanted to meet the drummer. Ladies at Lake Arrowhead yelled, "Roger, Roger, Roger," at me until I came over to talk to them. I thought they were kidding, but then one of them told me that she had a poster of me on her wall all throughout high school. I couldn't break her heart. And Jake and Johnny always did well, and I don't mean just photos and autographs. It was an amazing time, but all good things do come to an end. I hated playing with the backing tracks and the click track. We played live, but it was difficult and a hassle. I also gotten to a point where I had my drum set with electronic drums, the mixer on the iPod, click track, the setup, the breakdown. Being in a band is also a lot about waiting around. You work a lot and you don't get paid a lot. We had our share of drama and arguments too. We got into a fight before going on stage at the House of Blues Anaheim show over whether or not to play Electric Barbarella. We obviously had drama over lineup changes and threats from former band members, even having to alert venue security with photos not to let certain people into the show. At one point, we'd booked a show with the Cured and Blasphemous Rumors in Mission Beach, San Diego, at a club called Cane's. We all agreed to do the gig, and at some point soon after, Jake had to pull out. Instead of canceling the gig, I worked with some friends who had done some shows as a cult tribute called Sun King. We rehearsed a few times and played the show. It was a great show, and it's actually one of my favorite musical memories. My friend Virgil from Still Ill was at the show and talked to me afterwards. Still Ill, the Smiths Morrissey tribute band I helped start up, needed a drummer. Rio was doing well. Sun King wanted to continue if I would manage and book the gigs, and Still Ill wanted me back. Could I play in 3 bands? I talked to our pseudo agents at Music Zirconia, and it was advised that I would put all of my eggs into the Rio basket, as that had the biggest chance of success. So I stuck with Rio. Rio had added more and more songs and could play a nearly 2-hour set of most of the hits and some deeper album cuts, and we sped up the tracks for a more live feel, probably to a 1.5 times the speed of the studio cuts. But we could mix up our set lists a bit and have some variation. Unfortunately, the production of the new backing tracks became a bit inconsistent and the quality suffered. Some of the newer tracks were inconsistent in terms of volume of the click track or backing track. I'd often have to adjust the volume of my ears between songs and actually blew out earbuds near the end of a show in the middle of the Reflex at Fantasy Springs Casino. The backing track being too low in my ear and me not getting to adjust it contributed to the snafu at the grand show during View to a Kill. Frankly, I'd messed up on stage before, but there were also other factors. We'd scheduled a show at a casino in Arizona that I had to pull out of, causing drama with a promoter. Our agent at Music Zirconia had to step in. Soon after that, we had booked some shows at a couple of House of Blues venues in Texas. The deal was for the band to get out there at their own expense, play one show, and travel to the other at their own expense. It's amazing to play House of Blues venues, but this was a money-losing venture. I'd never wanted to tour either and didn't really want to do the shows. Jake had a friend, Danny, who he asked to fill in. Danny came and saw us play at the Del Mar Fair and filmed my playing the set. At this point, I was managing the band, booking and setting up gigs, handling payment, the websites, and social, which had at this point expanded to Facebook. Music Zirconia had asked us to sign exclusive with them, which I wanted to do, but the rest of the band was hesitant, thinking we could get more money if we booked our shows directly. We'd actually debated this at the grand show. It was a lot of work and could be frustrating. I was getting to the point where I was thinking of not playing drums and leaning into managing the band, which would prove to be ironic. I was working on some shows, but we didn't have anything solid booked. One afternoon, I got a call from Gil. I have some bad news, he started with. Now, Gil and I had really started and grown the band and got along well. We'd always been honest with each other. There had been other drama we'd had to deal with, like Jake wanting to get rid of Johnny due to his schedule and sometimes not being able to do shows. We'd actually played a couple of shows with one of Jake's friends as a fill-in for Johnny. There was also a debate about getting rid of Jason on keyboard, Johnny's brother. Gil and I shut this down as Johnny was a founding member of the band. Jake had threatened to leave the band more than once. So I thought Gil was going to tell me Jake wanted Johnny out or that one of them was leaving. And then Gil continued with, the band talked and we think Danny should take over as drummer and you should manage the band. If there's shows Danny can't do, you could fill in. I was shocked and bummed out. What popped into my head instantly was Gil, Johnny, and me agreeing that we were the decision makers. Where was the discussion? Where was the vote? On top of that, I had started the band. There'd be no band without me. Jake had tried to kick Johnny and Jason out of the band and replace them with friends more than once, and Danny was a friend of Jake's. Danny's a great drummer, nice guy, pro level, and a better drummer than I am by far, but this wasn't the way to do it. Frankly, if we'd had a serious talk about it, a professional talk, I might have been okay with it, as I was leaning towards bowing out of drumming and managing the band, maybe even being on percussion and adding something to the sound. Obviously, I was instantly livid. I told Gail I didn't know what to say, and at the same time, I was logging into the website and social media and changing the passwords. I took the website down as it was my work. I told Gail I'd talk to him the next day. I announced on social media that I was out of the band, and I don't think there was any public bad-mouthing. I do regret getting into it offline with Johnny a bit, as it got a little nasty, but we're from New York. We can't help it. At some point, the band realized they didn't have access to their website or social media. Frankly, that had been all of my work, and I wasn't going to just give it up. I thought they should start from scratch, maybe start a new band. I'd started the band, and if they were going to continue without me, they should start from scratch. Eventually, I gave in and gave them access to the web URL, but not the original site. They had to rebuild the site and the social from scratch. They wound up taking a few months off without gigs and had a falling out with the agents at Music Zirconia. They started booking their own gigs and got some good gigs, but not the gigs they would have gotten with Music Zirconia. They added some dialed-in costumes and really expanded the song list and threw in some great deep tracks and B-sides for the fans. So the band did evolve well. I haven't spoken to Gil since that last talk. I messaged Jake after his mom died. I've since reconciled with Johnny and we're paisans again. Paisan. I even had some contact with Irv. Raven shows up now and again threatening to sue everyone like the newspaper kid in Better Off Dead. Where's my $2? I'm not sure what has happened to Rio, though. Eventually, Jake succeeded in kicking Johnny and Jason out of the band, so had full control and replaced everyone except Gil with friends from other bands. Gil had told me once that he was scared of Jake quitting the band, as it would be so hard to replace Jake and probably mean the end of the band. Gil told me Rio and playing John Taylor were really the only things he had, and he didn't want to lose them. So that's the behind the music story of Rio, a tribute to Duran Duran. Her name was Rio, and she danced on the sand. Overall, it was a lot of fun. I didn't like the way it ended, and there were some things that I might have done differently. I honestly should have kept Sun King going and got back with Still Ill, both of who played live with no backing tracks. I probably should have kept managing Rio and moved over to percussion. Let the new guy run the damn backing tracks. I mean, that's most of the story. There are some parts that can't be told.